Hello and welcome back to Meeting Point English, and today we've got an advanced grammar lesson for you. Inversions after negative and limiting adverbials and also after so and such phrases. So negative and limiting adverbials can be moved to the front of a sentence if we want to create some emphasis. But if you do that, fronting of these adverbials will cause an inversion, and you must use the inversion. So here are some examples of negative adverbials. So if you begin any sentence with any of these, you will need to include an inversion shortly afterwards. And the same applies to these limiting adverbials. Now these examples here are very short limiting adverbials, and they can get considerably longer, which we will look at shortly. Now here's an example to begin with. If we have a sentence like he had never seen one, and we want to move never to the beginning of the sentence, it will look like this. Never had he seen one. Now you see the he had in the first sentence has changed to had he. Never had he seen one. Now the thing to remember with this inversion, it's exactly the same as when you do a question inversion. Look at this question. Had he seen one? You see the resemblance between the two. So remember, if you cover up your negative adverbial, the remaining part of the sentence should look rather like a question. So never had he seen one is the correct form if you move never to the front of the sentence. They are rarely seen here. And again, we're going to try this sentence with rarely at the beginning of the sentence. And then they are is the part that will invert. Rarely are they seen here. And again, just to check, are they seen here is a question. Looks remarkably similar. This door should on no account be left open. So let's move on no account to the beginning of the sentence. On no account should this door be left open. So we can make the inversion with should there. And just to check, should this door be left open is a question, so we can see the inversion is exactly the same. She not only plays the piano, but she also sings beautifully. We've got these not only but also structures. Now if you look at she not only plays, in this one we have no auxiliary. The previous one we had should, we can do it with can and all the modal auxiliaries. But in this one, there is no auxiliary. So if you cast your mind back to when you learnt to do question inversions, if you have no auxiliary, we have to find one. And of course it is do, does, or did. So the inverted form will be, not only does she play the piano, but she also sings beautifully. So there you can see, does she play the piano should look exactly the same as the question. They had never been to Paris before. Now, there are two ways I could have written this sentence. You could say they had never before been to Paris. Okay, with never before together in the middle of the sentence. Often you'll see before at the end of a sentence. When we do the inversion, there's a tendency to move never before to the beginning of the sentence. Not compulsory, but it would be more common to do that. Never before, and then the inversion, had they been to Paris? So there, just to check, there's the question structure. Never before had they been to Paris. I guess it would be possible to say never had they been to Paris before, but it sounds a bit unusual leaving the before at the end. I move both of them to the front if you're going to do this fronting thing. Never before had they been to Paris. I only realized later. Now, we've got only later as your limiting adverbial here, and I realized has no auxiliary. So to make the inversion, you'll need the auxiliary, and we're going to move only later to the beginning. Only later did I realize. And I can't see any way of leaving later at the end of the sentence here with this inverted form. You're going to have to move both of them to the front. Add the auxiliary did and get only later did I realize. And there, of course, just to check, is a question, did I realize? Now, in this one, we've got only later as the limiting adverbial. But as I said, some of these can be extended and they do get quite long. Look at this. I only realized after I had got home and opened the box. Now, a lot of people think only after is the limiting adverbial, but you can see here, highlighted in red, all of that is your limiting adverbial. But some people think only after is the limiting adverbial, and they try to invert the I had to had I, and it's not going to work. It's the I realized that needs the inverted form. So it's going to be the same as the previous one. But this sentence begins with a very long limiting adverbial. Only after I had got home and opened the box did I realize. And again, there's that did I realize at the end of the sentence. So be careful with the only after and only when limiting adverbials, because they can get quite long. So let's look at some inversions with so and such phrases. It was so windy that we couldn't go to the beach. And of course you can see there, if we move so windy to the front of the sentence, we'll get so windy was it that we couldn't go to the beach. And there's was it in the question form as well. He is so old that he can remember the war. So old is he that he can remember the war. Of course, this kind of inversion is not that common in everyday speech. It's really reserved for quite formal situations. You might see it a lot in literature. It's not that common in everyday speech, to be honest, but it is a useful thing to know. He finished the task so quickly that everyone was amazed. Here we have the adverb form, so quickly. And of course, finished has no auxiliary, so. So quickly did he finish the task. So quickly did he finish. And there's did he finish there. She was such a kind person. So there's such with a noun phrase there. Such a kind person was she that everyone adored her. Such a kind person was she. So here are some examples of negative adverbials fronting the sentence and followed by the inverted form. You can write those down if you press the pause. And the same with some limiting adverbials. As you can see, the only after, only when have been extended a bit. And as I said earlier, they can get very extensive. Here are some sentences beginning with so plus an adjective. And so with adverbs. And you can see that as they are adverbs, they're going to be using verb phrases. So The inversion is probably going to be using did or does or do. The second one there, the reason it's got the verb to be is because that is actually a passive structure. So carefully was the painting restored. So occasionally you might get them with the verb to be. Here are some such with noun phrases. Okay, so I hope that was interesting for you and useful. As I said, they're quite formal structures. They're not that useful in everyday speech, but in your formal writing, and if you're reading classical literature, you might find a lot of these. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that kind of stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.